best. You kidding me? Here with Ehrenberg? Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome on into the Awesemo YouTube page. We've got you for the next half hour. It is the Yahoo Wednesday NBA live show, 9-gamer on the way, and some very interesting news to follow in the hours to come, obviously, as it relates to who may play, who won't play, who has already been ruled out. I'm Adam Kaufman. Greg Ehrenberg is with me. You'll see him again a little bit later on tonight as he's working. I mean, he does what he always does, multiple shows every single day. How are you, man?
I'm good. And so while we're talking about content, I should also bring up all show, whatever, all of that.
Maybe you'll do it all show long. How about that?
Yeah, we could do that as well. But NBA injury report, which I usually do with Adam Scher, had to do it solo today because Adam wasn't available, which means that by myself, I'm doing the content, I'm producing it by myself. I edit, upload that all after the fact, but most importantly, there's a new thumbnail that you guys should all be checking out. I don't want to spoil it, but everybody should go to the YouTube channel, like this video, like that video, subscribe, and just check out the thumbnail, a little picture of me in high school.
Yeah, I won't spoil anything, but it'll definitely take you through the Wayback Machine. Some artwork that you typically see on hanging on Greg's wall whenever at least Tyler's producing and decides to do a little Photoshop. And we got our guy Mike Awesemo on the controls today. And of course, as we always tell you, get your questions in, your thoughts, your comments, your concerns, whatever it may be, into that Awesemo YouTube chat or on Twitter, wherever it is. And we are happy to try and help you out and build those lineups specifically for Yahoo here for this show. And before we get going and go position by position and all the stuff that we normally do, want to remind you, of course, we have partnered with our good friends at Yahoo Fantasy throughout this NBA season to bring you great offers. You can check out our exclusive limited time offer, gets you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo. That is the caveat. Sign up via the account, via your account, and the link below, deposit and play. That's it. Yahoo will then send us your name after you play with your first paid contest. We will reach out via email with your coupon. If you want to speed up that process, that's totally fine. Get your access, email support@awesemo.com. Get things straightened out for you very quickly and get you all set up. You can also claim a free $10 of site credit. And who wouldn't want to do that? You can click on the link in the video description below, which can be used to enter any Yahoo contest, including, of course, tonight's NBA $50,000 Wednesday baller, and naturally the $1 million baller for the Super Bowl, which is coming up in less than a couple of weeks. Make sure you check that out. Bengals and Rams out in LA. Make sure you use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give yourself the best shot at winning big. And we thank you once again for being here with us. As always, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications, all of it on the Awesemo YouTube page. So here's the big thing before we go position by position, Greg. Latest key injury news that we are watching for in, again, the hours to come before the 7 o'clock Eastern lock. So at the moment, you've got LeBron James doubtful to play for the Lakers. Anthony Davis is probable. Obviously, Russell Westbrook will be out there. James Harden, despite being a little bit limited last night, is expected to play tonight for the Nets. In fact, he's not on the injury report. As we know, no Kevin Durant. Kyrie Irving will be out there because the game is not in Brooklyn. And then you've got De'Aaron Fox questionable. Yusuf Nurkic is probable. Steven Adams, who is noteworthy here on this slate, he's questionable, as is Jordan Clarkson. Anthony Simons, Robert Williams, both probable. And you can add Nick Jokic into this mix. He is a game time decision as well, dealing with that toe injury. So if you had to pick one or two which are most impactful to you as it relates to how you're going to start building your lineups, who is it?
Nikola Jokic by a very, very, there isn't even a second option. It's Nikola Jokic 1, and then you have to say maybe like Jordan Clarkson at 6, just because I would have to throw another name in there. But Jokic is so much more impactful than any other player that's on the injury report. So that's one that's going to be really important to get an update for. The other thing also to consider, his game starts at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So it's not like it's going to be something that we're going to know ahead of time, or likely not going to be something we know ahead of time. It's going to be another slate. Going to want to be around to late swap, which yesterday late swap was huge. If you were just paying attention to the Warriors starting lineup yesterday, you didn't even really need too much other information to end up being profitable on yesterday's slate. If you just saw the Warriors starting lineup, it's like, oh, I'm pivoting my shares of of Gary Payton to Damian Lee. That was probably enough considering the ownership gap between the two of them to be profitable on yesterday's slate. So pay attention to the news today. I don't really have a good read for what happens with Jokic, but him being questionable is massive.
Or if you, like a fool like me, did do that pivot, or at least pivoted off of one Warrior onto Lee, had Lee, but then also had Lee in a bunch of lineups with Gary Payton, that might have been enough to sink you.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was for you.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. All right, so let's get into it. We'll go position by position, do what we normally do. And again, a lot of points in some of these games expected tonight. In particular, Magic at the Pacers, couple of floundering teams, but we got an over-under 225.5 in that one. In particular, a little bit later on, Nets Kings. That is 232 last look at the moment. So as we get into this thing, and we'll start, obviously, as we always do, with the point guards in particular. So your key guys, James Harden, Luka Doncic, you got John Morant, LaMelo Ball, Russell Westbrook, and then a little bit of a drop off, sort of that next tier. Among that upper class, before we get into value mid-tier guys, who stands out to you most?
Yeah, really good position to pay up for, in my opinion. And all three of Luka, Harden, and Russell Westbrook look pretty favorable to me. Of the trio, I prefer Luka the most. His numbers over the course of his career, or at least the last few years, when Kristaps Porzingis has been out, we've actually seen a decreased amount of points from fantasy production with Luka Doncic when Porzingis is off the court compared to when Porzingis is on the court. But it's still Luka Doncic. He's still one of the highest upside players in the league. He also has a fairly reasonable $52 price tag, a really favorable matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's a 9-game slate. There's a lot of players on the injury report. There's almost always a bunch of value on NBA slates of this size. So I don't find it that difficult to get all the way up to Luka. $52, he's my most rostered point guard in the build I have right now.
I would think if you're looking at, we'll get to value guys that are closer, obviously, to minimum salary at the point guard position. But if you're taking a look at sort of the middle tier guys that are floating right around $20 or so. I mentioned Jordan Clarkson. He's a question mark going into tonight for Utah. Of course, a guy with an increased workload. He already had a sizable workload, but now there's no, Joe Ingles, and there's no Donovan Mitchell. There's no Rudy Gobert. It's sort of slim pickings. You can't help but look at him, look at Mike Conley, his teammate as well. Do you think these two guys are really the guys that you want to fixate on if you are looking to pay down at all at point guard?
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about the Clarkson situation, it's hard to know because, like you said, he's on the injury report. We don't know if he's playing or not. And, but no Donovan Mitchell, no Joe Ingles. The minutes has to be filled
on Whiteside
somewhere.
Either, by the way. I left him out.
Which isn't going to directly impact Jordan Clarkson in any particular way. But if we are going to see Clarkson potentially sit, there's just not that many bodies for the Utah Jazz to go to right now in general, just to pick up the usage. So let's say Trent Forrest is also questionable to play. Let's say there's no Clarkson, there's no Forrest in addition to the other guys who are on the injury report. That would leave us with Conley, Bogdanovich, Gay, O'Neal, Azubuike, Pascal, Butler, Elijah Hughes. That's only 8 active players for the Utah Jazz today. So that would just mean really big minutes have to get filtered to Mike Conley, who we don't typically see play massive amounts of minutes, but this could be a game where they're just forced to play him, like 36 minutes or something like that. Also a pivotal game against the Denver Nuggets, because pulling up the standings right now, these two teams are in the same division. And because of how long the Utah Jazz have now been without Rudy Gobert, have been without Donovan Mitchell, they've really started to slide in the standings. So they're only up a game and a half on Denver right now. That lead shrinks to half a game if Denver wins today. They don't have another head-to-head against each other either. So I think this is a spot where we'd have to look really strongly at Mike Conley as one of the better mid-range options on the slate across the industry if Clarkson's out.
Well, and that's why I brought Clarkson up or Whiteside up with respect to Clarkson. Obviously, it's not like Clarkson's or Conley either. Neither one of these guys is picking up center minutes. But when you're just looking at it in terms of the number of active players that are going to be available, you sort of just, somebody's got to score. Like somebody's got to pick up points, and it's just one less body that might be available there for Utah. But like you said, we'll see if Clarkson's even out there. Otherwise, it just Mike Conley borderline automatic. You go to value at point guard, and you got a lot of guys, a bunch that are sitting at the $10 minimum or maybe $11, $12. Like you've got Davion Mitchell, obviously for Sacramento, with some of the question marks there, $12, and then guys that are all sitting at the minimum 10 right now. There's Trey Mann, Kemba Walker, who we don't spend a lot of time talking about, Rajon Rondo, who's finding his way into some lineups of late, Jared Butler, maybe Dennis Schroeder, who's now listed as a game time decision for that game for the Celtics tonight. any of these guys that are you looking to slide in any value at point guard, or are you just more again focused on paying up like we talked about off the top?
Not somebody mentioned there, but Brandon Goodwin. So the Cleveland Cavaliers, they don't have Darius Garland. He missed last game and has been ruled out in advance of tonight's game as well. They started Cedi Osman at point guard last game. It didn't go well at the top of the game for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They were not able to initiate any offense. They weren't able to score. The offense looked really stale. So what they did in the second half was they started Brandon Goodwin, not over Cedi Osman, but they started Brandon Goodwin in place of Dean Wade and played a little bit more of a traditional role. So Brandon Goodwin in that game, he ends up finishing with 27 minutes, scoring 24 Yahoo fantasy points. I suspect, given how that game played out last time and how well Brandon Goodwin played relative to the other guys that were out there at point guard, he was more effective at the point guard minutes than Cedi Osman. Easy enough to just slide Cedi Osman and have him play forward minutes. And Brandon Goodwin also certainly outplayed Rajon Rondo in that game. So I think Goodwin starts at point guard today and could play over 30 minutes. So he's my favorite min price play, assuming he starts.
Osman right now, and we'll get to him with small forward, obviously, but I mean, he is by far the leader on our ownership projections, sitting at about 70%. Then you have Isaiah Jackson, power forward, who obviously had a real good night the other night for the Pacers, is sitting at 42%. Couple of guys in the 30s. Karis LeVert, who, will one of the guys we'll talk about here with the shooting guard position. Does it surprise you, just because you mentioned Osman, that the ownership projection's that high?
No, not really. And we'll talk about him when we get there. But for Cedi, he's $12. He played 38 minutes last game. He's not the world's greatest points per minute fantasy producer, but who cares if he's going to play close to 40 minutes at almost the minimum salary? It's just really hard to fail in that situation. You could say like, okay, he's just going to be a crappy fantasy producer and score 0.7 fantasy points per minute. Okay, we're still looking at like 30 fantasy points at close to min price, considering the workload he's getting. So just somebody who just play him, put him in lineups and forget about it.
All right, shooting guards. Let's go there, and then we'll get to the forwards and center and everything. We've got about another almost 20 minutes. If anybody has any questions, slide them on into the chat, YouTube, wherever you got us. Kyrie Irving, shooting guard here on Yahoo, and then you have Karis LeVert, who I just mentioned. Also, Jaylen Brown for the Celtics. All three of these guys projected for right around 40 fantasy points tonight. Their pricing is similar. LeVert is in the best spot. He's at 30. It's a range. You have Brown at 35, Irving at 39. So they're all in that 30, window, 30 range, as is CJ McCollum. Tyrese Halliburton is in there as well. And then you get down to the 20s. Among this top trio in particular, is LeVert the guy for you, or are you more inclined to go with either of the current and former Celtic?
I've Kyrie projected quite a bit higher than LeVert, and there's also a difference in salary. I understand LeVert is $30, Kyrie is $39, but I have Kyrie projected for like 8 more fantasy points. And even with all these guys out for the Pacers, LeVert isn't really getting it done from a fantasy perspective. The usage hasn't been there, and that's more concerning to me than just the fantasy point output. Because if it was a thing where he's taking a bunch of shots and he's not making them, I'd be like, okay, he's going to start making shots at some point, but he's not even getting the shots up. I think defenses are really able to just hone in on Karis LeVert now that there is no Sabonis, there's no Brogdon, there's no Turner. So as a result, it's the last 4 games, 22, 26, 21, 34 fantasy points for LeVert. He's been really popular on all of those slates, but it's also the usage rate, like I said, that's really concerning. Usage in those games, 18%, 21%, 19%, 23%. He's not even putting up the shots that really make me think that he has a mass amount of upside at this kind of price point. So I think he's a little bit too popular for my taste right now on Yahoo. He's projected to be in more than a third of the field's lineups right now. It's not to say he's a bad points per dollar play. It just doesn't warrant anywhere near the kind of attention he's getting. And then I look at somebody like Kyrie, who's projected for less than 20% ownership. We know that there's no Kevin Durant for the Nets right now. It's also a matchup against the Kings, and the Kings are terrible, and they generally play at a fast pace and don't play good defense. The total for that game is 232 points. That is the most on this slate by nearly 10 points. So it's a game we already want to target, and Kyrie may just go a little bit overlooked by the field.
Alex in the chat asking about Bradley Beal while we're talking about point guards. He is out tonight for the struggling Wizards, who have lost their last 5 or 6. Tough matchup with the Sixers in that one tonight. Thomas Bryant also is out for Washington in that game, by the way. So sticking with the shooting guards, and And now it's interesting. You look to pay down, you get some cheaper guys, whether at the minimum or sitting around, $13, like Evan Fournier, if you can stomach it. Cody Martin's in a really good spot for Charlotte. You could look at Okoro for Cleveland. You could look at Gary Harris as well. Excellent spot for him. Some other guys that are, you can certainly make a case for, whether it's Ty Jerome, Josh Richardson, Aaron Holiday, if you want to go way down to that $10 threshold. Who stands out?
Yeah, so not quite at the $10 threshold, but Jalen Suggs is only projected to be in 3% of the field's lineups, and the minutes are up for Jalen Suggs. He's now played 33 or more minutes in all but one game since January 17th. So Jalen Suggs was dealing with a thumb injury for a little bit. I think it was a fractured thumb, if I remember correctly. Missed a bunch of time, came back, came off the bench, was playing limited minutes. The minutes are not limited anymore now that he's in the starting lineup. He's playing full minutes. The usage has been there for him, and he does a little bit of everything: assists, rebounds, defensive stats. So getting Jalen Suggs at $22 when the field is not rostering at all, that's a really appealing low-owned GPP play for me. If we're going really cheap, I would say going to Isaac Okoro. Not somebody that I generally love rostering in DFS, but there's so many guys who are out right now for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They just don't really have that many guys to turn to in the backcourt. That's why we had Chetty Osman start at point guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers last game, and Okoro ended up logging some point guard minutes in that game as well. But Okoro, positive matchup against the Houston Rockets, and we're probably looking at well over 30 minutes for Okoro once again. So at $10, I don't know that he's the most upside in the world, but I'll take the opportunity to save some salary with him.
Want to mention, as we're about halfway home here, if you are a resident of New York or, obviously close by, like our guy Greg right there, if you're in particular a resident of New York, sports betting, it's now live in your state. Congratulations. Take advantage. Welcome sports betting into your state with some fantastic bonus offers that we have available right here at Awesemo. Click on either link pinned in the live YouTube chat to browse all your offers, including, of course, a bet $10, win $200 if any team scores a touchdown, whether it's obviously football, free NBA jersey. If you bet $100 with Caesar Sportsbook, you can also take advantage of a $1,000 risk-free bet with BetMGM, up to $1,500 match deposit bonus with Caesars as well. These offers, they're too good to pass up. Click on that pin link and make sure that you start betting. Let's go over to the small forwards. And I guess, looking at this thing, just sort of painting the thing with a broad brush here, Greg, it's Jason Tatum, it's everybody else in terms of what the pricing, what the projections are. There are certainly some appealing pay down options. We'll get there, but do you want Tatum or are you paying up at other positions?
So here's the issue is Chetty Osman is the best value play on Yahoo by such a wide margin. We talked about him a little bit before and his potential role in this game. I don't think he's going to start at point guard again, but so what? He's going to slot in over at forward, and he's going to play 36 to 40 minutes again in this game in a positive matchup against the Houston Rockets. So I want to play all of the Chetty Osman at small forward, and he's such a high priority for me at the position that it's hard for me to really get to much of anybody else. Jason Tatum at $41. Clearly, there's upside there. If you need to pay up at small forward, he's the only option. He's $41. The next most expensive player at the position is RJ Barrett at $26. So it's not to say that Tatum is a bad play, but the guy I want to play at small forward, it's very, very clearly Chetty.
Yeah, Tatum, the next highest projection too is Bojan Bogdanovic at 31 versus 45. So it's really Tatum's in a class of his own as far as the small forwards. Doesn't again make him the best play, as you outlined. Osman's the guy that jumps out at you value wise. It's just so very clearly a discrepancy between talent at this position here tonight. Other good pay down options. I'm not sure you're going to find a better one than Osman in fairness, but just for the sake of outlining some, there's Justin Holiday, obviously for Indy. You've got Denny for Washington. You can look at Jeremy Lamb going back to Indy, Lance Stevenson, if that gets you excited. Williams there for OKC, Matisse Thybulle as well. Some of the good options that are, again, like all $10, $11, $12. Do you like any of them? Or if you're already paying $12, it's just give me all the Osman.
Yeah, it's just Chetty. But if we are going a little bit more expensive, I think the next best option is pretty clearly Bojan Bogdanovic, especially if Jordan Clarkson's out. Because we just talked about all the players that are out for the Utah Jazz. And then you start to figure out, like, okay, what happens to the usage in this team if Jordan Clarkson's out as well? Because then you're looking at a starting lineup of, I guess, Conley, Royce O'Neal, Bogdanovich, like Rudy Gay and Azubuike or something. Like it's just not really NBA caliber players for the most part, and that, or at least not guys we normally see starting games, and certainly not high usage guys. And then you just kind of try to figure like, okay, there's 100% usage rate to go around the starting lineup. I don't think Azubuike's taking a bunch of shots. I don't think Royce O'Neal's taking a bunch of shots. And you just kind of figure, hey, Bogdanovich is going to be responsible for creating some offense in this starting unit if there's no Jordan Clarkson. So to me, Bogdanovich is somebody who is generally more of like a high floor, low ceiling play, but he's somebody who already makes sense due to the injuries on Utah. And then if you take Clarkson out of the mix, he becomes somebody who, alongside with Cedi Osman, two really, really strong small forward value options.
For anyone who hasn't really been looking at injury reports today either, and is sitting there saying like, Koff, why do you keep talking about all these like good value pacers? Let me just outline this for you right now. Domantas Sabonis, Malcolm Brogdon, Miles Turner, the TJs, Warren and McConnell, and of course Goga. They are all out already tonight. The only game time decision is O'Shea Brissett. So it really is a who's who of value plays for the Pacers tonight. You can decide, obviously, how many of those guys you're comfortable rostering in a game that is expected to, have some decent scoring. We talked about it. 225 is the over-under for that one against the Magic, who, of course, are shorthanded in their own right, but they have been most of the season. It's just, it's not a good team. NBA worst 11-41. Let's go to the power forwards here. We got you for about 10 more minutes, a little bit less. And, it's, I don't know, you look at the top here and everyone's kind of equal in terms of how they're priced, what their projections are. Evan Mobley, Julius Randle, Miles Bridges, Tobias Harris. You can look at Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., Kyle Kuzma, who continues to defy the odds since arriving in Washington. Wendell Carter Jr. is in the mix as well. And maybe the best play of them all, though, again, Isaiah Jackson going back to Indiana. Is that the move?
Pretty hard to not be the move. So Isaiah Jackson last start put up a massive amount of fantasy points. He ended with 47 for Yahoo scoring. But there's also a lot of upside for his playing time because he only played 29 minutes last game. Considering how well he played last game and just the lack of big men this team has to go to, it's not unreasonable to think he picks up a few extra minutes because Goga Bitadze, Malcolm Brogdon, TJ Warren, Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner, TJ McConnell are all out for the Indiana Pacers, and O'Shea Brissett is questionable. So if you take Brissett out of the picture, the big men available for the Pacers is Isaiah Jackson. End of list. That's everybody. He's the only one. The next biggest guy available for them is maybe Torrey Craig. I'd have to look at the team's roster and see the actual heights of the players here. But I think Isaiah Jackson is the only guy who's taller than 6'6" that's still left on this team. So I think given how well he played last game, as long as he avoids foul trouble, he's going to play all the minutes he could handle here. And I think we're going to see him, especially against an Orlando Magic team that has players in the front court that are pretty big. Orlando is one of the bigger teams in the league where they're starting a front court of Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Bamba, two players who are going to play center on most teams. So they're going to need the size of Isaiah Jackson. They can't all of a sudden have, Torrey Craig guarding a 7'3" Mo Bamba. So I really, really like Isaiah Jackson today.
Wendell Carter Jr. is, priced up just a little bit at 25. So again, your salary savings, like you were just talking about, it's Jackson. You got Al Horford, who's 19. He's a buck more than Jackson. If you're looking for maybe a little bit of differentiation. And again, it's if Rob Williams was probable, doesn't play, sure, Al Horford becomes more appealing. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be all that interested. So then it sort of takes you down to guys who are like 10, 11 bucks. And that's, you could look at Torrey Craig, you could look at Royce O'Neal, you could look at, Rudy Gay, O'Shea Brissett, who we talked about. You could also, you got Shazim Shemezi, who I always screw up his name for Sacramento. You could look at KJ Martin if you want to. A lot of these, min guys, it's a really great position to pay down at. And in fairness, again, Isaiah Jackson at 18 is already paying down. But is there any argument to be made to, working in another guy who's obviously less rostered, because he's going to be popular, who's sitting around 10, 11 bucks?
Yeah, so Isaiah Jackson, clearly the top option for me. Really the only reason to go to somebody else would be to go a little bit contrarian. I have Isaiah Jackson projected for nearly 40 fantasy points today, which makes it really hard for me to get away from him when he's at $18. But just for the purpose of this exercise, I think there are contrarian plays to go here that if you wanted to play a bunch of lineups and you pivot off Isaiah Jackson, one of them, or if you want another power forward to play in the forward or the utility spot alongside Isaiah Jackson, Rudy Gay, you mentioned his name. He's only projected for 5% ownership. He's somebody who I think could play a really big role, potentially start for the Utah Jazz, especially if Jordan Clarkson's out. If I'm going really off the board, Marquise Chris is projected to be in like 0 lineups tonight. Nobody is expected to play Marquise Chris today. We have him projected to be in 0.2% of the field's lineups. And I have Marquise Chris projected fairly well today. There's no Kristaps Porzingis for the Dallas Mavericks. Marquise Chris, as much as he's always sucked from a real life standpoint, he's always been a guy who gets on the court and produces about a fantasy point per minute. The last 2 games for Marquise Chris, 16 minutes, 19 minutes. Now we're taking Porzingis out of the mix. We could see like 24 minutes from Marquise Chris, and considering his normal career averages of around a fantasy point per minute, we're looking mid-20s fantasy points from a guy who's min-priced and is projected to be nobody's lineup. So that's a super contrarian play that I think if you're playing chalk across the board and you want to just differentiate, all you have to do is plug Marquise Chris in there and you already have a unique lineup.
We don't have a lot of time, but I think the center position is fascinating. You know, we talked about it off the top with Nick Jokic, and he's the big question mark. He's a guy, it feels like night after night, you want to lock him in, but 57 projected points, $57 tonight. And again, he's questionable with the toe injury going in. You have Joel Embiid, who's been scorching hot. You have Anthony Davis, who is in all likelihood not going to have LeBron James next to him, and he is down at $41, you know, very clearly a pay down option compared to the 57 for Jokic or the 53 for Joel Embiid. Then you get to just another class of player, obviously, in Jared Allen, Yusuf Nurkic, if he's plays, Christian Wood, Robert Williams, Kevin Love, guys like that. Among that top trio, it wouldn't take much to convince me to play Davis. It really wouldn't. How are you looking at these 3 guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them are really strong looking options. The question just becomes, obviously, does Nikola Jokic play or not? If he's in there, he's the top option. It's always the case for me. If Nikola Jokic plays, I have him project for more fantasy points than anybody else on the slate. We just don't know if he's going to be active or not. It's a back-to-back situation for the Denver Nuggets, and yesterday's game was terrible for them. They ended up losing by a the final score was only 130 to 115 against the Minnesota Timberwolves, but they were down by 28 points, I believe, at one point in the game. They didn't look all that competitive. The defense looked slow and sluggish. I think this is probably a good time to just give Nikola Jokic a night off. So if I was forced to guess whether Jokic plays or not, I would say that he's not going to be in there, which opens up a whole nother can of worms. But I don't say that with a whole lot of confidence. I'm just making a guess here about the Nikola Jokic situation. And that's something that we really have to consider. If he's in there, he's clearly the top pay-up option. If he's not, I lean towards Embiid over Anthony Davis. Embiid, the tear he's been on over the last month has been ridiculous. The amount of usage that he's taking up on offense, crazy. His usage rate over the last handful of games, 41.7, 39.4, 48.4, 47.7, 41.6, 55.6, 43.1. This is a guy, usage rate well over 40% over the last handful of games. And that just comes with a really high ceiling and floor for fantasy purposes. So Joel Embiid would be my favorite pay-up option amongst that group if Jokic isn't able to play.
Cheaper guys, you could look at PJ Washington. You could look at Daniel Gafford. Some have asked about going back to Nick Claxton. You could go to Dwight Powell. You could look at Nerlens Noel if you're feeling a little loopy. Who do you think as far as these cheaper guys who are sitting, you know, well below $20?
Yeah, and by the way, something to mention also, because people are asking about DeMarcus Cousins. Here's another wrinkle to throw into the mix. DeMarcus Cousins is questionable. So just because Jokic gets ruled out, we don't even know if Cousins is going to play. But if we do get that situation, Jokic is out, Cousins is in, Cousins starts in. Yes, we definitely want to play Boogie there, but it's a lot of variables there because both of them are currently listed as questionable. And I don't even know that Cousins is going to be in the rotation at all if Jokic ends up playing. But yeah, for sure. DeMarcus Cousins, good talking point there. If Jokic doesn't play, Boogie's the best value play at center from the cheap end. Talking about guys that we mentioning
too, by the way, Aaron Gordon is also questionable. So you might have offense missing all around for Denver.
As for cheaper guys, Montrezl Harrell's $15. Thomas Bryant is out for the Washington Wizards. We talked about Bradley Beal before in his situation. But we've seen the Wizards ever since Thomas Bryant came back. He had the torn ACL that they were slow bringing him back from. They've been playing 3 centers, Daniel Gafford, Thomas Bryant, Montrezl Harrell, and now they're down to 2. And I know Gafford had very briefly fallen out of the rotation, but Now I think we could probably assume something like a 24-minute split for the center minutes between Harrell and Gafford. And if that's going to be the case, Harrell's always been a pretty good fantasy producer. He's somebody at $15 that makes sense.
All right. Well, we're going to have to get out of here in a moment. I want to tell you that there's plenty more great content coming your way over the course of this Awesemo day here on YouTube, including more NBA content. You got our pal Lindquist and Rinpack coming up. You got NBA Deeper Dive. That's 5 to 6 Eastern. So it begins in about a half hour. NBA Live Before Lock. Greg will be coming back with Terry. That is 6 to 7:30. And then 8 to 9 tonight, PGA Live Before Lock with Ben and Eric. So a lot of good stuff, obviously, on the way, taking you through the rest of this Wednesday hump day. Greg, look, I'd ask you what you got going on the rest of the day, but I guess this is it. You're going to sit in front of a camera and entertain people.
Always the case. So I'll be back live before lock later tonight, 6 to 7:30. So stick around after lock, 30 minutes, sweating the games, talking about bets and whatever else is going on. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that good stuff.
I'm going to go to the dump. That's not a euphemism for some sort of, weird, I'm going to the bathroom. I got to go to the transfer station, just dump off a huge load of crap. That's what I'm going to do with the rest of my night, Greg. I just wanted you to know.
You should still go to the bathroom, though. I wouldn't advise.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if the urge comes, I'm not going to fight it. Sometimes you got to do these things. Thanks to Mike Awesemo, our producer. He's great. He's terrific. We'll see you later.